This is the Change Physician, episode 111. Welcome back to the Change Physician. I am Melissa Cady, the Challenge Doctor, with my co-host, Dr. Kevin Cuccaro. And we have a lovely guest today, Dr. Sogol Pahlavan, who is a pediatrician out of Houston. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. This is so exciting. I'm delighted to be here.
Awesome. Well, we always like to introduce our guests with just a little bit of a brief background or history of kind of like starting in the going into medical school phase and where you are now. If you can just take us through that journey.
Yeah, so I'm going to start a little bit just further back just because I was not born in the United States. I immigrated to the US. And when we immigrated, we landed in Houston. And I've literally been in Houston since. So undergrad, I went to an hour and a half away to Texas A&M, which is College Station, which is a small college town. And then I came back and I actually did my med school in two different places. I went up to Texas Tech for the first 2 years. And then my husband was in law school. So then I got transferred down to Houston to be with him for my third and fourth year, which is Baylor. So I graduated from Baylor. So again, Houston. And then I stayed in Houston for my pediatric residency just because Texas Children had just it still does, has a really robust pediatric program. And our chair of pediatrics then was just a huge advocate for pediatrics. And he really inspired a lot of the Baylor residents to enter into pediatrics. So, and then after that, my story gets a little bit interesting. So in my residency, I was trying to choose between a fellowship. And so I was choosing between emergency room and PICU. And so I made the decision to do PICU. And I actually went through the whole match. And I wanted to end up on the West Coast, of course, California, because that's where I'm Persian and everybody wants to go to California if you're Persian. And so I interviewed there and I got into UCLA and then I was pregnant. And so I finished residency in July, right? And then I gave birth in August and they knew that I was going to come back like in October or something. I was going to start fellowship a little bit later. And then I kind of pulled out just because like reality set in because my husband had to find a new job. Poor thing, he took the bar and passed the bar. And then I was like, I don't think we can afford it. I don't think we have babysitting. Like, you know, we had to make these adult decisions now that you have a child and all of my family is here. And so I came out of residency, like I gave birth to my daughter and then I kind of like did the motherhood thing for 4 months. And I told my program director in California that I couldn't make it, which is one of the hardest decisions that I had to make and hardest conversations I had to have. And then after that, I was like, I guess I need a job. Like, I'm not really sure what I need to do. And so then my sister and I were a year apart, but we did residency together at the same program. So I think she had taken some time off. I don't remember her story. But so we approached this private practice physician that I had actually worked with as a med student, like the summers where you can go and work with whatever specialty you're interested in. So I called her and I was like, hey, do you have any, like, we'd like to job share with my sister. And do you have any space? And she was like, yeah. And so that's what I did. Like, that's literally how I found my first job. Yeah. And we worked there for 2 years. And it was an excellent practice just because she was independent and we were very eager to learn not just the clinical side of medicine, but like the administrative side of it. And she was really open to teaching us. And we would have stayed on with her if we had thought we were a better fit. But after 2 years, we left and then we started our own practice, which was not planned at all either. Right. Everything that I do is just kind of like, not much planning in it.
Yeah. It seems to work. And what I think is really interesting about that is you had all these major stressors occur at once. So you're visiting residency, you're going to go into fellowship, which in and of itself is somewhat stressful. Then had a child, which as a parent who had kids during residency, that's really, really stressful. made some, made what sounds like a really good decision to stay where the family is supportive of you. And then you kind of fell into this role where you were job sharing with your sister. Is that make like, so could you kind of talk about why you and your sister decided on that path? Because a lot of people coming out of medical school, they're like, oh, I have all these loans, I have to do all this stuff. But it seems like you made it a conscious choice to do something that at least provided you time to do childcare, especially in that really early formative time frame. So how did you come to that decision?
Yeah, so whenever I make decisions, like the financial part of it is never like I don't prioritize that. And even with opening up our clinic, people are like, oh my God, like, let's do a spreadsheet and what's the cost and is it going to work? And yes, I mean, I did some of that, but it wasn't like the primary driving force behind my decision. And it never is. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. And I will say, so my husband had graduated then. And so he had a job, which is when you come out of law school, you're literally like an intern for 5 years, right? So you're not getting much of a salary. And I had great support from my parents. Like we lived with them for the first 6 months when my daughter was born. And so I didn't base my decision over like, am I going to be able to pay my student loans? And I didn't have like back then compared to what physicians are coming out with student loans. I did college in 3 years. So that wasn't, and I got some scholarships. And then I think my parents paid for some of it. And so the bulk of the student loans was med school. And back then, like med school wasn't that expensive, right? Compared to this. So it wasn't like I was coming out with $500,000 or something like that. I think it was like 120 total, right? And so for me, again, it wasn't like the decision wasn't based on finances. It was based on like, okay, at this point where I am in my life, what am I prioritizing? And I would like to have that sometime with my first newborn child, right? And so how do we make that happen? And so that's kind of the mindset that I move forward with. And it was like, okay, let me job share. And then and as far as like, why didn't I go to like an academic center or a larger, healthcare entity? Okay, so like when you immigrate here as an immigrant, right? Like the big thing that like what United States stands for is like opportunity, like the American dream, right? And so that American dream, through my family experiences and everybody that had immigrated here, because my dad has 5 brothers and they all immigrated here, right? And they all own their own business of some sort. My cousins are dentists and they all own their own dental offices. So it was just like, oh, that's just what you do, right? It wasn't even a question about like, is it safe to go out into the private world? It was like, oh no, I mean, that's what my dad did. That's what all the cousins are doing. That's what the American dream is. It's like having your own, land or business or whatever and building something in the community, whatever your passion is. So I think that's what a lot of that is what drove me to make these earlier decisions, because we opened up our clinic 2 years after finishing residency. And like, what I want to tell your listeners is like, y'all have so much support right now. And I'm talking about like private practice stuff, right? Resources. When we opened up our practice, we had nothing. I don't even know if there was Facebook, right? Or if there was, it was just used for personal use, right? And there were none of these like different resources and podcasts and like physicians that had their niches and different things. No, it was like literally it was like me, and I filled out the Medicaid application on paper. Because I mean, but the great thing about that is we learned everything from the bottom up, right? Because we couldn't outsource it. First, we didn't have the money to outsource it. Second, we had a lot of time because we're like, oh, we're working part-time, so we can do this on the side. So there's definitely, these days you can just kind of outsource everything, which I think can make it a little bit easier. But then my motto is always like, if you are running a business, know every aspect of it, because when people leave or when people pull out or something happens, then you can go in and kind of fill in and know what's going on in that position versus relying on someone else to, you don't have to know all the details, but you should know like the big picture stuff. Yeah. So that's been our approach.
Yeah, you made me think of, some of the things I saw like on you have an Instagram profile and some of the things that you make mention of, and some of these are realizations as a physician. So you've expressed just like your realizations, or maybe just the way things have been done around you about owning your own business and the benefits of doing that, and the struggles that you could have, but now things might be better. But in this course of your career in the private sector, what are other realizations that you have discovered about the medical system or about, physician personal development?
Yeah, so I think I call having my business my fourth child. I was like my third. I have 3 kids, so my fourth child, right? And so every time you have a child, you not only learn to connect with that child, but you learn so much more about yourself, right? Because each child brings a different part of your personality out, right? So it's this like song and dance that you have to kind of create between you. And there's a lot of like stepping on each other's toes and like tumbling and falling and not being able to do the moves correctly. And so, oh my God, there's so much I learned about myself. And you know what? I will say I recently learned about myself because I'm super stubborn, right? And like the type A, like I know how to do it. Like, I had that attitude, like no one can do it better than me, so I need to do it by myself. So like delegation was huge. And that's something that I still struggle with. It's like, if you can get to a point in your business by doing things by yourself, right?
Right.
But then you hit a wall. And in order to be able to scale, and in order to be able to have some like emotional freedom, you've got to be able to let go and delegate. So delegation was huge, which I think a lot of physicians, I'm in a lot of like private practice groups, and that's one of the biggest things that they struggle with. It's like, well, they don't know how to do it, or I do it better, or they do it. Mine was, no one can do it as fast as me. Mm-hmm. No one is as efficient as me, right? Because I work super fast, right? No one gets as fast as I do. But that's okay. Like, people work at different pace. So that was one. And then communication. Like, to this day, I still have to be so conscious about it. I feel like people should just read my mind, right? Like, right? Like, I want the check-in process to be this particular way, and I want the customer service to be this particular way. And like, I don't understand how you sitting at the front desk would want it any different, right? And so, yeah. So like a lot, like the HR part was very difficult for me. And HR part is very people, like the people skills, right? Because I didn't learn that in residency, right? I did like biology undergrad, research in a lab, like talking to, like doing stuff on plants, right? Like no communication with people. And then the only communication I had with my patients, but that's so different, right? That connection that you make with the patient. So yeah, delegation, communication, I would say time management, which I was pretty good at in that sense. Organization, I was pretty good at that. And then the most important thing, which is kind of where I this is why I've kind of shifted into educating physicians more about, self-development, is just the self-development part, right? Like knowing that, hey, first of all, it's not a race, whatever goal that you set, right? Like you as a person have to be able to enjoy the journey, right? Instead of just running at 120 miles per hour, setting these goals and checking these goals off your list, but not really listening to how your body feels, if you've taken time for yourself, how you are emotionally, right? How you are mentally. Like a lot of us show up physically just because we're dedicated, right? We don't want to let down our patients. We don't want to let down our staff that relies on us, right? We don't want to let down other providers that are working for us if we don't show up. So we physically show up, but I would say I'm 45, and like at 40, I totally stopped showing up emotionally. Like I was so shut down because I hadn't processed any of that going 120 miles per hour. And so that's what I am trying to really educate the physicians, is that yes, it's great to have goals. It's great to think big. It's great to, try to, save our communities or innovate or create or any of that. But we never put ourselves into that equation, right? We use our bodies and we use our energy to move us forward into whatever goal that we set, but we don't look back. We don't pause. We don't stop for a second and see like, hey, how do I feel today? Like, why am I tired? Is it because like I've been working that 12-hour shift, or is it because I'm working that 12-hour shift and all these thoughts, are going in my brain and ruminating, and I'm criticizing myself and I'm judging myself, and I am, carrying this emotional baggage over years that I don't want to face. And so at 40, like I literally thought I had cancer, because I was like, I'm just tired all the time. Like I was tired. I would sleep 13 hours a day and I'd wake up and I'd be like, oh, I feel post-call. The way I explained it is post-call. I felt post-call all the time, on holidays, on, vacations, at work, everything post-call. And so then you start going down like the physician, like, what's the differential? And do I need to get a CBC? And do I have a leukemia? Right? Like all that stuff. Like, do I have chronic fatigue syndrome? Right? And it wasn't. And at some point I was like, I think this is just midlife. Like you're a mom of 3 kids. Like you have this business, I think this is how people feel. And then I started reading a lot of like books about like self-help books, right? I do a lot of reading, like spiritual kind of reading, not religious, but spiritual stuff. And so I started reading a lot of the big spiritual leaders, and then just getting involved with more Facebooks, like women physician entrepreneurial leadership Facebooks, right? And then I would see like, oh, I'm not the only one with this story, right? There's a lot of women sitting in leadership positions, and from the outside, they look fine, right? They're like, have these titles, they have this respect, they have this whatever salary, they've got, some have children, some don't, some have partners, whatever, but everything like professionally, personally, financially, they're where they need to be, but they're showing up in the smaller, closed groups, more vulnerable, and saying like, something is going on. Like, I'm so tired. I'm so stressed. I'm so overwhelmed, right? I'm so anxious, right? And so I started looking into that. And it's so funny. Like, I never considered myself an anxious person, right? I consider myself hyper. So how my feelings showed up for me was this like chronic fatigue. But when I started like really looking into it and dissecting it, yeah, I was super anxious, and I didn't even know it. That's how bad I was suppressing my emotions because I was like, no, you're not anxious. You're fine.
Yeah.
Or this is just how it is. I mean, I think that's,
Yes.
I think that's one of the dangers is we sometimes typically, well, this is just how it must be. And this comes into a topic that we've talked about quite a bit on the change physician over the last year or so, and has come up over and over again with a lot of our guests, is because you're sort of just swimming, and you're swimming through this thing, and you just assume that this is how it is. And it sounds like what happened is you at least started developing this awareness by talking to other people. So your head now is popping out of the ocean, and you can kind of see and get at least a bit of a big picture. And that breath of awareness now allows you to sort of examine and say, well, it doesn't have to be this way. So can you kind of tell us a little bit more about, so when was there a moment maybe that you were like, things clicked? Or
so so I would say couple of moments. The most profound moment was like a couple of things. So I have my youngest she was 10 at the time, and she's super feely and intuitive and like just like an empath, right? So at some point we were talking about getting a dog, or I think we had just gotten a dog, and I was completely against it because I was like, I don't have anything more to give. Like I cannot take on another child per se. Like I can't have a fourth child. So anyways, they made the decision and they had the dog. And so I was like going back and forth a lot, and everything about the dog, I said something negative, right? So they were talking about the dog at the table, and then I said, I don't remember, but I said something negative. And then my daughter turned around and she was like, and she's so sweet, right? Like if anybody else would have told me this, I would have been like, why you don't appreciate me, blah, 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 right? And she was like, Mom, it feels like you don't have any love in your body.
wow.
Yeah. Coming from your own child, like I'm gonna get teary.
Yeah.
Right? And this is like the sweetest little kid. Like she's not criticizing me at all, right? She's just, because kids are so intuitive, right? They're so much more grounded than us, and they see so much in us. It's just that we don't want to hear what they have to see. Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You're just a little kid. That's so not true. Kids are your biggest teachers, right? As a pediatrician, as a mom, as a scientist, your kids are your biggest teachers. And so when she said that, again, instead of going in defense mode, I paused. I was like, what's that mean? Like, let me take that, like, let me dissect, like, let me see where that's coming from, right? Or and then other comments came up that she had previously told me, but I was like, whatever, it's just a kid. And it was like, why don't you ever smile? Right? Like, what, or, oh, Mom, I see your stress. It wasn't like at a time where I didn't think I was stressed, right? I was like washing the dishes, right? I see your stress. Do you want to, whatever, read a book? Do you want to play with la la la? Or she would like suggest something to make me feel better. Right? So when I paused to have this awareness and to look at it, I started finding clues that had dated back for, oh my God, so long. Like if I had to write a book about it, it would be 1,000-page book, right? And so that's when, and that was the time when COVID hit. So it was like the timing was beautiful, right? Because we had, the clinic wasn't as busy, like volume wise. There was a lot of busyness on the administrative side because everything changed, right? All the policies changed, whatever. But at least I didn't have to, it was a different kind of busy. I didn't have to see the volume of patients. And so I took that time, and I had known a little bit about coaching through like the leadership groups, the physician leadership groups. And I was like, and I was like, I don't need a psychiatrist because I'm not like, I have no family history. I no, I don't think I'm suicidal. Like, I didn't think I was anxious, right? I just I couldn't figure out why I was tired and why I didn't enjoy. Like, if you asked me, like, what is love? I wouldn't be able to tell you. Like, in my first journal, because I started journaling and I was like, how do I want to feel? And it was like love. But then I was like, I don't even know what that is. Like, what is that? So then I put in joy. I was like, I kind of know what joy is supposed to be from the movies. And I think the hardest part for us physicians is we have a lot of shame. Well, I had a lot of shame because I was like, everything is perfect in my life. Like, my husband's awesome. Like, this has nothing to do with anything outside of me. My husband's awesome, supportive, my kids are great. I've got financial stability, like everything, like my providers that I work for, like nothing outside of me. My brain wanted to think it was them, right? Which it had for a long time. So I lived in this like anger and frustration. But when I realized, like, no, I think this is all about me and me not having like joy and love. And then how do I come out and even acknowledge this without being judged? Right? Oh, you poor doctor that lives in this area with kids in private school that has a business. Sorry, you don't feel love. Like, eye roll, right?
Yeah, no one feels sorry for you.
Right.
Right.
Well, but I'm gonna, the sad thing about that is we're laughing, right? But talk about how judgmental that is. Because when you're feeling like you're dying on the inside, I mean, I can understand it. Okay, if Jeff Bezos comes out and he says, like, I'm empty inside, people are like, oh, sorry, Jeff, you need another $100 billion. But realistically, as humans, shouldn't we have some degree of empathy no matter who the person is, recognizing that in their personal experience, no matter what those external resources is, we still have this journey that we're going in. So it's interesting because because the danger, I think, with this, Sogol, is as physicians, we will then not take the step to actually address what is important to us.
Yes.
Well, who am I to have these complaints? And then we neglect it, and then we continue to die on the inside. And that is definitely not healthy.
Yes. And it's not healthy for us, and it's not healthy for our patients and our families and whatever relationship that we're in, because whatever energy that we're carrying inside, we can't be who we are truly, and we can't so I always talk about like sharing and giving, the difference between giving and sharing, right? Giving is what we've been doing for so long, right? Here's my time, here's my whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then we're completely depleted, especially after COVID. Our bandwidth, whatever we had, is gone, right? But sharing is like, you fill yourself up first, right? You feel good about yourself. You feel joy within yourself. You feel peace. You feel calm, not like all the time. You're not going to be like this guru sitting on top of the mountain meditating 24 hours a day, right? No, I'm not talking about that. I'm saying you should be a little bit more balanced. And then when you do, the act of sharing is completely passive. Like, you don't have to like make an effort to go out and be like, I'm going to give you this love or this energy or this empathy or this attention and this connection. It's like, literally, when you are at peace with yourself, you will, and I don't know if you've felt this, like, you walk into the room and sometimes full of strangers, and then like someone just catches your eye because like you just connect with them on an energetic level. Like, you're like, oh, you're so calm. Like, your presence is so calm, right? Like, your presence is so, just want to, like, you're attracted to them and they're just like standing there. They're not doing anything particular, right? And that's what sharing is, when you fill yourself up. And I feel like I've been doing this work. So I got a coach. That's what happened. I got a coach because I was like, I don't think I need a therapist. I got a coach because I was like, I don't know where I am in my life. Let's forget. And then complete transformation, right? I did the work. Like, I literally listened to the coach and did the work every single day. And then I loved it so much that I got certified through for coaching, certified through coaching school. And now I'm a coach as well. And so that journey started 15 months ago, like March 2020, whenever COVID hit, right? And the difference that I see, the difference I see in myself is just like completely different person, right? But the difference that I see in my kids, amazing. Oh my God, my teenager, my 16-year-old, right? Which is a copy of me, like strong-willed, independent, like opinionated, go type A, which we've got two similar things. They butt heads all the time, right? And it's like, she wants to spend time with me. Like I just posted this last night. She texted me. She's like, hey, Mom, I want to go out to dinner with you. And I was like, why? What do you want?
Yeah.
Right? Like you'll see that difference, or like she'll want to be beside me more. Like even my 12-year-old now, like those little things are just like, they're priceless, right? You can't buy those things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's, I've been thinking as you're talking, how you talked at the beginning about these soft skills and how, we're not really taught how to do these things, but it's also that kind of that soul searching, it's like soft skills and that soul of who you are that we're not really good in our training. And the fact that you're not the only one, obviously, all three of us here have gone through these changes, realizations, and it's amazing how when you get comfortable, at least a little more comfortable with yourself, and pausing and being comfortable with the silence of just you, and not feeling like you have to fill it with tasks and things and people in order to like not have that dissonance within you.
Yes.
Like you can literally kind of be at peace, and you said you kind of emanate a certain energy, and I know I go through little phases. There'll be moments where that old part just wants kind of like push that energy, and it pushes people away. But yet when you can just kind of like be and almost let yourself radiate in a way that's more, it's almost more inviting. Yeah. It's amazing how people respond to that. And I just think it's awesome that you are giving that gift to other people, because that inner work, it's hard to get there unless
oh my God, it's so hard to get there. And I feel like I'm lucky in the sense, because if just from a lot of my readings and like these spiritual leaders, so you have to get through that awakening through a darkness, right? And a lot of people's darkness are like really dark, right? Like suicidal, like severely depressed, debilitated, that kind, right? And then they come out on the other side and they're like, oh my God, I would always go back to that if this is where I am now, right? So whenever that cognitive dissonance comes in, because it comes in all the time, right? I call it the toddler brain. My toddler starts like having temper tantrums all the time, every day, right? And so I just remind myself, I was like, and having a lot of self-doubt, like, are people really going to listen to this? Like, is this really useful, right? Stuff like that. I go back and I was like, I don't ever want anyone to be in that place that I struggled with for like 4 years without any resources. Like there was like nothing out, there were no answers out there. And this is why it's so important to have podcasts like y'all and other podcasts that bring light to this and we talk about it. And because I think the first step is like, whatever you're feeling is okay. Mm-hmm. Don't change it. Don't suppress it, right? And just come forward with it, like make that, and having a place, like creating a platform or a place or a safe space which my safe space was these like women Facebook leadership groups, right? Where I was like, I saw other people being vulnerable and coming forward. And I was like, oh, I'm allowed to talk about this here. Right? Like no one's going to judge me or shut me out, right? People are going to actually support me. And with every story that you heard, people brought different views, right? Different experiences. And some of them resonated with you and some of them didn't, but you learn from every story. So I always say I love to talk. I can talk forever, but my talking comes from like storytelling. I think sharing our stories, that storytelling storytelling is a huge part of what gives life meaning. They're like 5 pillars of meaning in life. And I don't remember the other 4. There's a book, wonderful book I read like 10 years ago, but one of them was storytelling, and it really resonated with me. And so this is, I mean, I congratulate everybody that because it's vulnerable, like you're being vulnerable when you tell these stories, right? When you share these stories, but with every story that's shared, I honestly, you are saving lives. You are. Like if I knew of this podcast that had a guest that was talking about this like 4 years ago, I would have been like, oh my God, I get you. Like, I understand. That's me. Like, oh my God, there's like light out there for me. Like, I'm not dying of leukemia.
Yeah, definitely. Some of these things are not medicalized.
Well, and it's interesting though, because when we've talked about this before, is a lot of times internet, social media, there's always negative, how awful it is. And yet, just as you kind of said when you started in your clinic in 2008, and the opportunities for connection are so profound, and for physicians to recognize that you aren't alone, and that these experiences are normal, and that there is there could potentially be a better space. There's a group that have been vulnerable, yeah, we are living in a remarkable time to have these resources.
Yeah. And the other thing about social media, one of the reasons that pushed me to do this as well, because my kids are like approaching teenage years, and even like the 10-year-old wants Instagram or whatever. And I would have I wanted a deeper connection. So I would look at social media and I'd be like, okay, everybody looks perfect, but when you actually talk to them, nobody is fine. We don't look like our pictures on social media. And I was like, I want to change that. Like, I don't want everybody to look pretty and, filtered or whatever, which is in the teen world, and probably in the adult. I'm not in a lot of the adult stuff. That's what, and then being a pediatrician and seeing a lot of anxious teens, and it goes back to bullying and social media and self-confidence and body image, stuff like that. And I was like, we need to do something. So maybe I, as a person, can come out on social media and just talk about, like, without a filter, with whatever in my PJs, and just be like, hey, this is me, right? I'm not perfect. And look, I have all this other stuff that I want to talk to you about.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, and speaking of social media, if people want to hear more of your story, or of these things that you want to share with people from time to time, where would you like to direct them to?
Yeah, so I'm on Facebook and Instagram. It's Mindful Living with Dr. Sogol. If you just put Sogol in the search engine, there's not that many Sogols out there. So you'll see Mindful Living with Dr. Sogol. And then I think my Instagram page is like Dr. Sogol _ Mindful Living. But again, just put in Sogol. And then I also have a podcast that's Mindful Living with Dr. Sogol, which I start with my story. And then I will actually, in each podcast, take you through exactly how I was coached and the tools that I used for this, this journey that I've been in. And it's all about, coming full circle, which is connecting your mind to your body and then to your soul, right? Those are the mind, body, and soul connection, which I'm still on the mind, because there's a lot to talk about with the mind. I just started my podcast. It's like 20 episodes. So, and on my social media page, it's a lot of just how I feel during the day, and how I've used coaching during that particular, whatever that struggle that I had for that day, to kind of, and I use, because I'm a pediatrician, so I use a lot of I do toddler, teen, and parent brain, and I explain those kind of things. So I give really concrete things instead of esoteric. It's the difference between these spiritual books. They're so woo-woo, and you're like, I don't know, can you give me something more tangible? I try to give really tangible tools that you can use in everyday life, and anybody can use.
That's great.
And we all need those. That's definitely, we definitely need more tangible tools. So that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, Kevin, anything that I missed, or do you want to take us out?
No, I think that was fantastic. We could talk to you for probably, I can see you are a talker and you have interesting things to talk about, and you're an absolute pleasure to talk to.
Yes.
So yeah, we could talk a long time here, but to recognize and appreciate everybody else's time and to anticipate potentially future episodes with Dr. Sogol, I'd like to say thank you very much for joining us on the Changed Physician podcast. For those of you who want to learn more about Dr. Sogol and her story, of course, she gave you the references there. We'll have them linked into the podcast itself. If you are a physician or a physician ally and are interested more on the journey on how you then start this process of change, you can join us at the community at thechangedphysician.com. And until next time, stay well.
Take care.
Thank you so much.